The 1960s are often remembered as a golden era of television, filled with legendary shows that shaped pop culture forever. But for every hit, there were plenty of spectacular misses, series so strange, misguided, or downright baffling that they barely lasted a season. And yet they existed, and some were pushed with huge studio confidence. Which forgotten disasters did audiences suffer through back then? Get ready, because what you're about to hear will make you wonder how these shows ever got on the air. My Mother the Car, 1965 to 1966. This wasn't just a flop, it became a punchline for decades. My Mother the Car featured Jerry Van Dyke as a regular man who discovers his deceased mother has been reincarnated. As a 1928 Porter automobile, yes, the family matriarch was now a talking car that offered life advice through the radio. NBC pitched it as their next Bewitched or Mr. Ed, hoping audiences would embrace a quirky magical sitcom. Instead, they got a surreal mess. Each week revolved around Van Dyke's character desperately hiding the secret of his talking vehicle from family and friends. Storylines turned into repetitive slapstick routines, awkward excuses, close calls, and nagging conversations with a car. Critics called it one of the strangest concepts ever broadcast. Even Van Dyke himself later admitted he knew it was ridiculous while filming. At first, curiosity brought viewers in, but the novelty wore off quickly. Without strong writing, the premise collapsed under its own absurdity. By the end of its single season, My Mother the Car had become the gold standard of failed television. Even now, when people list the worst ideas to ever reach prime time, this show is near the top. It's proof that just because something is unique doesn't mean it should make it past the pitch meeting. The Tammy Grimes Show, 1966. Some flops fade quietly, others crash so hard they leave a mark. The Tammy Grimes Show was one of the latter. Designed as a showcase for Broadway star Tammy Grimes, it featured her as Tamantha Ward, a scatterbrained heiress stumbling into comic situations with her fortune, relatives, and eccentric lifestyle. On paper, it was supposed to highlight Grimes's stage charisma. On screen, it became a confusing jumble. Critics tore it apart immediately. Reviewers called the scripts flat, the pacing awkward, and the humor out of step with audiences. Grimes's theatrical energy didn't translate to sitcom rhythm, leaving even the supporting cast looking lost. Viewers didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. Ratings nosedived from the very first episode. The disaster was so obvious that ABC pulled the plug after just 4 episodes, one of the fastest cancellations in network history. That kind of early exit usually signals a complete breakdown in concept, execution, or both. Today, the show is barely remembered outside of TV trivia circles. The Tammy Grimes Show is a reminder that star power alone can't save a project without solid writing and clear direction. Broadway brilliance is one thing, primetime sitcom success is another, and in this case, the gap between the two was simply too wide to cross. It's About Time, 1966 to 1967. Imagine Gilligan's Island, but with astronauts and cavemen. That was the pitch for It's About Time, a sitcom created by Sherwood Schwartz, the same man behind Gilligan's Island itself. The series followed 2 astronauts who crash land in the Stone Age and try to adapt to life with prehistoric families. What could have been a clever twist quickly became a repetitive string of modern meets primitive gags. Episodes leaned on the same jokes: cavemen confused by wristwatches, astronauts trying to invent basic technology, and endless slapstick misunderstandings. The theme song, with its catchy "It's About Time, It's About Space" chorus, became more of a punchline than a selling point. Audiences laughed at the premise, but not in the way the producers intended. When ratings began to slide, the show tried a desperate reversal. Suddenly, the astronauts brought the cavemen back to 1960s America, flipping the concept into another fish-out-of-water setup. Instead of fixing things, the change confused viewers even more. It's About Time lasted only 1 season, a clear example of how a quirky idea can quickly burn out when it leans too heavily on gimmicks. Despite Schwartz's proven track record, this was one time he couldn't repeat his island magic. For TV historians, it stands as a case study in how even big names can crash when they try to outdo themselves. Turn on 1969. Some shows fail slowly, others implode instantly. Turn On holds the dubious record of being one of the shortest-lived series in history. Designed to ride the success of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, it was a rapid-fire sketch comedy program with wild visuals, experimental editing, and almost no traditional structure. The result was chaos. The premiere episode aired in February 1969 and was so baffling that some ABC affiliates cut the feed mid-broadcast. Viewers were left staring at static or emergency programming. In other markets, angry phone calls flooded stations as audiences tried to make sense of the bizarre, joke-free sketches. Critics described it as cold, alienating, and humorless. Even industry insiders admitted they couldn't figure out what the show was trying to do. By the end of the night, ABC had already canceled it. No second episode ever aired. Turn On has since become a legend for its spectacular implosion. It's the TV equivalent of a rocket exploding on the launch pad, hyped as groundbreaking, remembered as a disaster. If anything, it proved that pushing boundaries is one thing, but losing your audience entirely is another. Few shows can claim they flopped in less than an hour. Turn On can. The Pruitts of Southampton, Chamois, The Phyllis Diller Show, 1966 to 1967. When you have a comedy legend like Phyllis Diller, you'd expect success. Instead, The Pruitts of Southampton became a cautionary tale. Diller starred as a wealthy socialite hiding the truth that her family had gone broke. Each week, her character tried to keep up appearances while juggling freeloading relatives, nosy neighbors, and endless comic obstacles. The show had potential for biting satire about high society versus real life. Instead, it delivered scattershot humor and uneven storylines. Even Diller's trademark one-liners couldn't hold it together. Critics noted that the writing wasted her talent, while audiences drifted away. Ratings quickly sank. Midway through the season, producers rebranded it as The Phyllis Diller Show, hoping her name alone would revive interest. It didn't. The show limped to the end of its season and was quietly canceled, leaving little behind except a reputation for squandered potential. For Diller, it was just a detour on a long and successful career. But for TV history, The Pruitts of Southampton is remembered as proof that even when you have the right star, the wrong scripts can sink the entire project. It promised champagne comedy, but delivered flat soda instead. The Baileys of Balboa, 1964 to 1965. Not every idea needs a copycat, but try telling that to CBS in the mid-60s. With Gilligan's Island proving popular, executives rushed to create another nautical comedy. The result was The Baileys of Balboa, a sitcom about a working-class charter boat operator constantly clashing with wealthy neighbors on the glamorous Balboa Island. Instead of charm, audiences got recycled jokes and one-dimensional plots. Each week, the same tired rhythm played out. The Baileys would hatch a scheme, something would go wrong, and the uptight rich folks would look foolish. Then everything reset for the next episode. What was supposed to be light-hearted satire quickly became monotonous. Even the beachside setting, which should have been an advantage, couldn't hide the weak writing. Critics were unimpressed, calling it predictable and unimaginative. Viewers agreed, tuning out after realizing the show had nothing fresh to offer. While Gilligan's Island leaned into absurdity and camp, the Baileys of Balboa tried to play it straight, and in doing so ended up dull. CBS canceled the series after a single season, letting it sink quietly into obscurity. Today, it's remembered only by die-hard TV historians as a misfire born of network desperation. The Baileys of Balboa stands as proof that you can't manufacture lightning twice. Sometimes a hit is one of a kind, and its imitators are destined to sink without a trace. Camp Runamuck, 1965 to 1966. Summer camp is usually a setting for heartwarming stories or coming-of-age comedies. Camp Runamuck decided to go for chaos instead. The series centered on two rival camps, one for boys, one for girls, filled with prank wars, bungling counselors, and constant slapstick. NBC pitched it as a spiritual cousin to McHale's Navy, hoping zany antics would keep families laughing. But what audiences got was noise. Episodes leaned heavily on food fights, paint explosions, and ridiculous misunderstandings that felt more exhausting than funny. Even kids found it overwhelming. Instead of clever camp humor, every story became a sugar rush of broad gags and exaggerated performances. Critics noted the frantic pace, lack of character depth, and reliance on slapstick that grew old after the first few episodes. While rival sitcoms of the time balanced heart and humor, Camp Runamuck had neither. Viewers tuned out, and NBC quietly canceled it after just one season. In hindsight, it's a reminder that more energy doesn't always equal more entertainment. Camp Runamuck proved that too much wackiness can be just as deadly as too little. What was meant to be a playful look at summer camp ended up as one long headache, and audiences were glad to pack up and leave. Tammy, 1965 to 1966. NBC hoped to build on the mild success of the Tammy film series by bringing its country girl charm to television. Tammy starred Debbie Watson as a kind-hearted farm girl navigating life in the big city while staying true to her down-home values. It sounded like a wholesome family hit in the making. Instead, it fell flat. The problem was simple. The show leaned too heavily on cliches. Tammy was endlessly sweet, endlessly naive, and endlessly caught in fish-out-of-water plots that offered little variation. Her rural innocence clashed with urban hustle, but instead of sparking comedy or insight, the result was predictable and syrupy. Critics complained that the scripts were shallow and repetitive, and while Watson was likable, she couldn't carry the series on charm alone. Viewers looking for something fresh or funny quickly lost interest. The show's attempts at humor often felt outdated, especially when compared to sharper sitcoms of the era like Bewitched or Get Smart. After one season, NBC pulled the plug. Tammy faded into television history as an experiment that never found its voice. It's an example of how leaning too much on a formula, country girl versus modern world, without clever writing or memorable characters, can doom even the most well-meaning project. Mr. Terrific, 1967. Superheroes were everywhere in the 1960s, thanks to the popularity of Batman. NBC decided to cash in with Mr. Terrific, a comedy about a mild-mannered gas station worker named Stanley Beamish, who gained powers from a special government-issued pill. For 1 hour, he had super strength and the ability to fly. The concept might have worked as a parody, but the execution was painfully clumsy. Instead of witty satire, the show relied on repetitive slapstick. Stanley constantly fumbled rescues, bungled fights, and embarrassed himself. The effects were unconvincing, even by 1960s standards, and the scripts leaned more on silliness than sharp comedy. The joke wore thin quickly. Critics called the show uninspired, and superhero fans were unimpressed by its cartoonish tone. Unlike Batman, which thrived on colorful style and campy self-awareness, Mr. Terrific lacked personality. Viewers who wanted adventure were disappointed, and those who wanted parody didn't laugh. The series lasted just one season before NBC shelved it. Today, Mr. Terrific is remembered as a half-hearted attempt to write a trend that never took off. It's proof that timing alone can't create a hit. You need good writing, strong characters, and more than a gimmick. Without those, even a super pill can't save the day. The New People, 1969 to 1970. Decades before Survivor or Lost, ABC tried something ambitious with The New People. The premise was intriguing. A plane full of college students crashes on a deserted island, leaving the young survivors to build a new society without adult guidance. It had the potential for gripping drama, moral dilemmas, and survival storytelling. Instead, it became a slow-moving soap that audiences quickly abandoned. Rather than focusing on action or adventure, the show leaned heavily into moody debates about leadership, ethics, and responsibility. Episodes dragged as characters argued rather than acted. The concept may have been ahead of its time, but without engaging plots, it failed to keep viewers watching. Critics noted that the show bit off more than it could chew. Instead of exploring survival in a thrilling way, it felt bogged down by endless conversations. With too many characters and not enough excitement, audiences tuned out after just a few weeks. ABC canceled The New People after only 17 episodes, quietly shelving a project that might have worked with sharper execution. Looking back, it's remembered more for its potential than for what actually aired. The New People showed that even a strong idea can flop without momentum or compelling storytelling. The Hathaways, 1961 to 1962. Some sitcom ideas sound odd. This one sounded impossible. The Hathaways starred Jack Weston and Peggy Cass as a suburban couple raising 3 chimpanzees, yes, actual chimps, as their children. ABC marketed it as a light-hearted family comedy, but what aired was something closer to weekly chaos in a living room. Every episode revolved around the chimpanzees creating trouble, from destroying furniture to outshining their human parents. The laugh track insisted it was funny, but most audiences just sat in disbelief. Even kids, the very group the show targeted, found it more unsettling than entertaining. Critics were merciless. They called the series bizarre, strained, and a clear sign of networks scrambling for ideas. The chimps often stole focus, but not in a charming way, more in a reminder that maybe wild animals didn't belong in a sitcom. The Hathaways lasted only 1 season before ABC pulled the plug. Today, it's a trivia footnote and often listed among the strangest flops of all time. It proved that not every family comedy is meant for prime time. Sometimes the line between a quirky gimmick and a bad idea isn't thin. It's a canyon. The Ugliest Girl in Town, 1968 to 1969. If ever there was a show that made people ask, who approved this? It was The Ugliest Girl in Town. The series followed a struggling Hollywood actor who, through a series of contrived mishaps, disguises himself as a woman and becomes a British fashion model. From there, mistaken identities and awkward jokes piled up week after week. ABC hoped the outrageous concept would stand out in a crowded TV landscape. Instead, it left viewers confused. The comedy leaned on repetitive gags about costumes, wigs, and characters being fooled again and again. The humor wasn't just dated, it was already tired by the second episode. Critics panned the show, calling it cringeworthy and flimsy. The lead actor seemed trapped in an endless routine of switching outfits rather than developing a character. Viewers tuned out quickly, and ratings sank almost immediately. After just 1 season, The Ugliest Girl in Town disappeared. Today, it's remembered mainly as an example of how shock value or gimmicks can't replace solid storytelling. The premise might have been unusual, but without strong writing or real heart, the show never stood a chance. Mr. Broadway, 1964. On paper, Mr. Broadway looked glamorous. It starred Craig Stevens as a public relations expert navigating the high-stakes world of New York's theater district. CBS envisioned glitzy drama with stylish intrigue, hoping to capture audiences with tales of power, influence, and Broadway magic. But when the curtain rose, there wasn't much to see. The problem wasn't the setting, it was the writing. Plots dragged, characters felt hollow, and the supposed drama lacked punch. Instead of excitement, episodes often played like dull case studies in PR work, hardly the stuff of gripping primetime television. Critics called it style without substance, and audiences agreed. Despite Stevens's talent, Mr. Broadway fizzled after only 13 episodes. The glamorous backdrop couldn't cover up the lack of compelling storylines. In an era when viewers had plenty of choices, they simply moved on to shows with more personality and spark. Mr. Broadway now sits in the pile of forgotten 60s flops. It serves as a reminder that flashy settings and high concepts aren't enough. If the heart of a show isn't beating, no amount of glitter can save it. Hank, 1965 to 1966. NBC thought it had a clever idea with Hank. The sitcom followed a broke but ambitious young man who sneaked into college classes under false identities, determined to get an education by any means necessary. Every week, Hank scrambled to stay one step ahead of administrators while juggling jobs to support his younger sister. The premise had potential, but execution fell short. Episodes relied too heavily on recycled, almost-caught scenarios, turning the show into a predictable routine. Audiences never quite knew if they were watching a comedy about youthful ambition or a drama about dishonesty. The tone shifted awkwardly, leaving viewers unsure how to connect. Star Dick Coleman tried to inject charm into Hank's constant cover-ups, but even his enthusiasm couldn't rescue uneven scripts. Critics described the show as confusing and unfocused. Ratings never climbed high enough to justify another season. Hank ended after just 1 year, remembered mostly for its unusual setup. Today, it's cited as an example of how even creative ideas need consistent writing and a clear tone to succeed. Without that, even the most unique concepts can fail the test. Accidental Family, 1967 to 1968. Accidental Family tried to combine a heartwarming premise with sitcom humor and ended up pleasing no one. The story paired Jerry Van Dyke as a struggling comedian with Lois Nettleton as a widowed farm owner. Forced to live together for financial reasons, the mismatched duo attempted to raise her son under one roof. The idea aimed for an opposites-attract dynamic, but the chemistry just wasn't there. Van Dyke's frantic comedic style clashed with Nettleton's grounded performance, creating a tonal imbalance. Scripts leaned on predictable culture clash jokes, city slicker versus farm life, that wore thin quickly. Even the child character felt underused, more prop than participant. Critics noted the lack of spark and the forced humor. Audiences, sensing the same problem, tuned out. The show limped along for just 16 episodes before NBC pulled the plug. Accidental Family is now remembered as a classic case of a network trying too hard to manufacture charm. Without genuine chemistry or fresh storytelling, the series never clicked. It promised warmth and laughs, but delivered a flat mix of neither. The Hero, 1966 to 1967. The Hero tried to get clever with television itself. Richard Mulligan starred as Sam Garrett, an actor who played a rugged TV hero but was secretly insecure and anxious behind the scenes. NBC pitched it as a self-aware comedy, banking on audiences enjoying an inside look at Hollywood life. Instead, it landed with a thud. Every episode leaned on industry jokes and satire about the pressures of fame. But instead of feeling smart or fresh, the humor came off flat and confusing. Viewers outside the entertainment world didn't get the references, and even those who did found little to laugh at. Critics described it as in-jokes for insiders, leaving the rest of America scratching their heads. Mulligan gave it his all, showing the charm that would later make him beloved in other roles. But even his energy couldn't rescue a show that felt more like an awkward parody than an actual sitcom. Without relatable characters or real stakes, The Hero lacked both heart and laughs. NBC quietly ended the series after one season. Today, it's a reminder that not every behind-the-scenes spoof connects with audiences. While later shows would succeed with Hollywood satire, The Hero simply wasn't one of them. The Eye, Cara Williams Show, 1964 to 1965. In the 1960s, networks were obsessed with finding the next I Love Lucy. The Cara Williams Show was one such attempt, with Cara Williams cast as a witty secretary who secretly marries her co-worker. The problem? Their workplace strictly forbade office romances, setting up endless cover-ups and frantic schemes to keep their marriage hidden. On paper, it looked like a recipe for farcical fun. On screen, it felt like a pale imitation of Lucy's magic. Week after week, the humor relied on recycled slapstick and predictable misunderstandings. Williams, a talented comic actress, seemed stuck repeating the same gags while the chemistry with her co-star never quite clicked. Critics called it stiff and uninspired, while audiences quickly lost interest. The series lasted just one season before fading into obscurity. Despite the efforts of its lead, it never captured the spark that made its inspiration timeless. The Cara Williams Show is remembered today mostly as proof of how hard it is to duplicate comedy lightning. You can copy the structure, but without fresh writing and genuine chemistry, even the best performers can't save a weak premise. Rango, 1967. By the mid-1960s, Westerns were running out of steam. NBC still tried to squeeze life out of the genre with Rango, starring Tim Conway as the most incompetent Texas Ranger imaginable. Instead of heroic gunfights, viewers got pratfalls, goofy faces, and endless bungling. The concept aimed for parody, but instead it looked like a tired attempt to recycle Conway's slapstick from McHale's Navy. The Old West setting offered little originality. Each episode played out the same. Rango tried to complete a mission, made a mess of it, and somehow stumbled into success. Critics found the gags repetitive and the writing uninspired. Audiences weren't laughing either, and ratings sank almost immediately. Despite Conway's natural comedic talent, the material simply wasn't strong enough. Rango lasted just 17 episodes before NBC pulled it. Unlike classics like F Troop, which balanced parody with charm, Rango was all clumsy slapstick with none of the wit. Today, the show is little more than a curiosity, remembered mainly as a rare miss in Conway's long career. Rango proved that even a great comedian can't carry a weak script across the finish line. Gidget, 1965 to 1966. Here's a case of a show that failed at first, but later became legendary. Gidget introduced viewers to Sally Field as a surfing teen navigating high school, crushes, and California beach life. ABC hoped to cash in on surf culture, but the series sank in the ratings after just one season. At the time, audiences weren't ready for a female-centered teen comedy. Episodes balanced lighthearted romance, family dilemmas, and sun-soaked adventures, but viewers never fully connected. Critics considered it charming but too lightweight to stand out in a competitive schedule. Yet Gidget didn't die quietly. In reruns, the show found a second life. Teen audiences embraced Sally Field's energetic performance, turning the short-lived flop into a cult favorite. It later inspired movies, spin-offs, and even helped launch Field into stardom. So while Gidget technically counts as a flop in its original run, its legacy outshines many of the hits from the same era. It's a reminder that sometimes failure is only temporary and that the right star can turn even a canceled show into cultural history. Captain Nice, 1967. If Batman proved campy superheroes could work, NBC's Captain Nice showed how quickly the formula could wear thin. William Daniels played Carter Nash, a meek chemist who drank a serum that transformed him into a clumsy, costumed crime fighter. But instead of thrilling adventures, every episode became a series of jokes about his overbearing mother, laundry problems, and awkward rescues gone wrong. The humor felt one note, and audiences had already begun tiring of superhero parodies. While Batman thrived on colorful flair, Captain Nice looked drab and repetitive. Daniels committed fully to the role, but the scripts gave him little to work with beyond pratfalls and obvious gags. Critics called it desperate, and audiences simply ignored it. The series barely made it through one season before NBC shelved it. Unlike Batman, which still holds cult appeal, Captain Nice faded without leaving much behind. Today, it serves as a reminder that chasing trends rarely works unless you bring something new. Captain Nice wanted to ride the superhero wave, but ended up drowning in weak jokes and a lack of vision. It was a hero show nobody asked for, and even fewer wanted to see twice. So the next time someone calls the 1960s the golden age of television, remember these forgotten disasters. For every classic that still gets reruns, there were shows that barely limped through a season before vanishing. Which one of these would you actually dare to watch just for the train wreck factor? Drop your pick in the comments, hit subscribe, and keep exploring TV's weirdest corners with us. After all, history isn't just hits, it's flops too.